Hi, we're Nia and Mary-Anne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon. Good morning, Mary-Anne.
Good morning. I've got a
How you
really
doing?
exciting thing to talk to you about today.
Yay!
I'm always excited by aging, as you know, which is
Mm-hmm.
sort of swimming against the tide, isn't it? Because most people aren't. But I really am. I do think potentially
Mm.
this last third of your life, can you believe that a third of your life is lived
In
in
old age.
retirement, so to speak,
I'll
in
never retire.
in our culture? Um, and I sort of want to call this Age is Just a Number because I read a book called that by a retired dentist, and it really inspired me. He was something else, quite unique, and he was various times in his life he picked himself up off sort of personal crises, and he's always used exercise as a sort of reliever of many things. And he
Mm.
is unique, and he landed up, winning veteran races at the age of 97. So I'm
Don't
not
think that's going to
saying
happen to us.
no, it might not, but I think what reading it was so inspiring was the possibility, and
Yeah.
what he will inspire you with is that at any age you can pick up your fitness.
Mm.
And I think what happens in our society is really sad because we almost we've normalized frailty as we age.
Yes.
But not only that, the whole I'm thinking about your children and how they're going to work, and my grandchildren. They're going to work to support this incredibly aged population that's
Yeah.
now looming. I mean, it's been looming a long time, but we're at that sort of switch point now where there's too few younger people working to support our welfare system, basically.
Mm.
Um, anyway, we're not going to talk politics, but health and fitness in old age is a rarity in our world. Although remember, it does exist in some communities, as we highlighted in the blue zones.
Mm.
And the thing in the blue zones, and we're not going to go through all of that, but the main thing, apart from connections in society, which in a way is secondary to activity, because if you're not mobile and active, you'll get less and less connected.
Mm.
So, although connection came out as, one of the sort of real strong points in the blue zones, activity was the thing that got you there. And lots of the blue zones, people didn't retire, remember? They were farmers or, they just kept doing whatever they were doing.
Mm.
And were, in some cultures, I think was in Japan, they were encouraged to work as long as they wanted to.
Mm.
And there were tax breaks and things. I mean, we literally tax people into retirement. So there's lots to talk about. But of course, I'm very interested in this area, funnily enough, as I am, in my 70s now.
Yeah, I just wondered whether it's worth sort of defining frailty because I don't think people understand what that means, and I think there's a lot of misconception over what frailty
Frailty.
means. So,
How would you define it?
well, I just looked it up because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people think someone who's frail is someone who is sort of not able to cope and not make decisions and not necessarily be independent and we often describe people as being frail as sort of
Yeah.
coming to the end of their life, don't we?
Life.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
actually frailty has an actual definition. It's a health state related to aging, which
Okay.
obviously we knew, in which multiple body systems gradually lose their inbuilt reserves. Around 10% of people aged over 65 years have frailty, rising to between a quarter and a half of those aged
Oh,
85 and over.
that's shocking. That's a shocking statistic. 65, 10%.
I mean, at 65
Ooh.
years, to be frail, that's
Oh,
terrifying, isn't it?
oh,
Because
terrifying. That
yeah,
terrifies me so much that I do squats.
yes,
I mean, and that's what I'm going to try and convince the listeners and also
mm,
you. I know you do squats anyway, but
I do
I think
squats.
at your age, it's very hard to envisage what this might mean.
Yes, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? People don't you don't want to think of yourself in that state.
No.
But we know from what we were talking about previously that people who are poorly and who become bedbound
Yes.
lose huge amounts of muscle in a very
Yeah.
short period of
Within
time.
10 days.
Within 10
Yes.
days, exactly. So in which case you can understand how quickly something like frailty can actually catch up with you without you
Absolutely.
knowing.
And what you're doing by keeping fit as you age is that you're putting sort of fitness in your bank because
Yes.
things do happen. And but the fitter you are, and the more you have in that bank, the better you are at getting back up again. So,
So it's like
when you're young,
saving
you
for
get back up
retirement.
for
Yeah.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
a bit like a savings. Your
Yes.
muscles are a bit like your
Exactly.
savings. So you want
Exactly.
money to access in your retirement so you can go on your cruises and whatever else you want to do, but you also want muscles so that you can do do
Yeah.
life. Yeah, absolutely.
So for future generations, we really have to change this. I can't think of anything more pressing, honestly, around health than
Mm,
changing how we see our aging process.
mm.
Because we often age in our society in an overweight, over medicated, and physically and mentally inactive sort of state in a
Yeah.
medical system that doesn't do that well to deal with this either, because we tend to treat people without reference to aging in this weird way.
Mm.
Um, and we almost expect and we normalize people getting frail. So instead of getting people more active, we give them more medications and medical procedures like, joint replacements. But none of this really gets them where they should be going.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in my previous job,
Yeah.
polypharmacy was a huge
Yes.
thing, and I
Polypharmacy.
stopped a
Oh,
lot of people's medications that
yes.
who were taking things unnecessarily. But
Yeah.
we have got to the point where I think probably the phrase is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So if
Exactly.
you've got an 80-year-old or a 90-year-old
Yes.
who has fallen out of
Yeah.
bed and broken their hip or fallen over and
Yeah.
broken their hip, and you want to do a state of the art joint replacement on that person,
Yes.
should we not consider their quality of life and their recovery and what the
Exactly.
medications for that recovery are going to do to them, rather than just go, oh well, we can do this, so we should.
Absolutely. And do you want to know this terrible figure?
Oh, please do.
Um,
I don't. Maybe
that
not actually.
that 40% of those over 60 take 5 or more medications a day.
Oh well, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh, it surprises me. I can't really get my head around that. How did we get to this? How did
Well,
we
it's
get to this?
this is there are electronic prescriptions now, so it's not as quite
Yeah.
as obvious. But when people used to come in with their
Yes.
paper scripts and they'd have six
I just
prescriptions full of
can't I
stuff.
can't get my head around it. What are they all taking?
Well, this is the thing, and a lot of the things that they are taking are to prevent future events. And we can go into these kind of things about you know
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
statins and blood pressure
Statins in the
medication.
water. Yeah,
But all of this, it's like, well, when you're 80 and you've had a
yeah.
heart attack, should we then say, well, we're going to give you a medication to prevent the risk of your heart attack in the next 10 years? Because are we going to live?
Yes, we're talking about someone up to 90.
Exactly. I mean, so these are the questions I think we need to ask.
I think we
And
need to stop pussyfooting about this whole age business. I think that the trouble is the pendulum swung from people are old and let them just
let them
become
die.
frail to
Yes.
let nobody accuse us of
Not
of
looking after them in the
yeah, of
same way.
ageism. So
Mm,
I think we've sort of overstepped the mark here. I also
right.
looked at retirement, which is really interesting. So it's quite a modern concept, retirement.
Oh,
So
is it?
people,
Mm,
yeah, people used to work until they couldn't work anymore.
mm,
Um, and of course, the Industrial Revolution brought a lot of workers, and there was the beginnings of sort of systems where workers paid in to a scheme
mm,
that then allowed them to have this golden time beyond their
mm,
work life, and it was paid for. So they'd ensure their final years were not in the labor market, but um, they only lived to about 65. I mean, in
Mm.
fact, they lived not long beyond retirement age in those days. So the scheme worked really well. In fact, it was a bit of a
Some
government
profit
tax, wasn't
making.
it? I mean, basically, it was a tax on workers.
Yeah.
So it
Oh,
was
it's hilarious.
devised when we had population growth as well. So we were
Yeah.
also growing more young people at the bottom, and all this worked really nicely. But now what's happened, of course, and this has been happening a long time, I know, is we shrinking the younger population, and we're getting older and older at the top. So,
Yeah.
and governments don't really want to talk about this, but it's a very sobering statistic that
Mm.
20% of today's population are expected to live to 100. How are we going to fund this? It just, when you
Well,
look
yeah.
at the figures, it does not add up.
And the other thing is, of course, if we've got people who are frailer, who are living
Yes,
longer, then their
yes,
cost to not just the cost to
exactly.
the health service, but it's the cost to you and to me in our
Everybody,
taxes, the
yes,
cost to
to the
families
families, yeah.
when they have to put them in care or pay for carers. It's
Exactly.
huge, huge
And the
costs.
last 10 years of most people's lives, if they live in a long time,
Mm,
is spent in some sort of frailty.
mm,
This is why I'm so passionate. This is not only about me, and it's not only about my family. It's about the whole of the structure of our society, that
yeah.
we have to look at this and we have to do something different. So
Mm,
we're asking these schemes to fund people for almost a third of their lives.
it's quite a long
Most
time.
Yes, most of that is unproductive, and some of that they'll be needing care, right?
Yeah.
We're also losing a huge amount of talent at 65. I know we've increased that number a bit now, but it's a drop in the ocean, really. So there's lots of people who retire at almost the peak of their working talents.
Mm,
So you're losing not only the talent, but you're losing years of productive life. Now, that was done originally. People were encouraged to retire to allow young people into the
into the
workforce.
workplace. Yeah.
But that's no longer true, because basically we haven't got enough young people coming in. So we need to change these ideas. We really do.
And the benefits of having somebody with all that experience to the younger
Yes.
workers is huge. I
Yes.
mean, you,
Exactly.
you could almost use you and I as an example, couldn't you? I
You
mean,
could.
I was a bit older when I met you, but as
Yeah.
it would have been a similar
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Similar sort of thing. Um, and I think, I mean, I know I'm very privileged because I had a job that I really loved. I wasn't necessarily hugely financially rewarded, by the way, but I was lucky enough to live in a sort of structure that allowed me to work at something I loved. And so not retiring was an option for me.
Mm,
And, I still obviously am not completely retired. So I am of the lucky few that are entering my latter years with passionate work interests. How incredible. And, I love the fact that you even work with me at all. But we do have things to give, both of us, from our different stances.
and
Um,
experience
yes,
and different ways
exactly.
of living, and I think that's the
Exactly.
important part. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Set the scene. We have this huge funding gap. We have a lot of people retiring at 65 that could still be very productive.
Yeah,
If you want to work beyond your retirement age, by the way, you're often penalized by taxation systems. The other
right.
thing that he talks about in the book, which I thought was really interesting, is that work and well being are closely linked. So, we're not talking about people with really awfully physical or mundane jobs. We're talking about people who could work on and would like to, and
Yeah,
they lose the daily structure of work. And this often means they get less active overnight. and
Yes.
therefore vulnerable to
To
developing chronic
Yeah.
diseases.
And you lose quite a social aspect for
Yes,
some
all
people
that.
because
Yes.
not to say that they don't have a social life outside of work,
No,
but
but
they
less.
lose contact with those people with which they had daily interaction. And
Yes.
to get daily interaction when you're retired, or
Yeah.
I've been a stay-at-home mum for a while, so I
Yeah,
know
you
how
know.
difficult it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
When everybody else is out at work, it is actually challenging to get daily interaction with
Exactly.
people.
So retirement is a hugely challenging time for people in our society. We sort of cut them off almost.
Mm.
And if you've been a full-time worker, as many men are in our society, I mean, I feel privileged that I had children and managed to do some part-time work. So you're slightly more adaptive.
Yeah.
Um, but full-time work all those years and suddenly cut off to nothing. Now,
Yeah.
lots of retired people do incredibly well, and there's also a socioeconomic bit to this. So the more
Mm.
funding you have, the more likely you are to join things, go to
Mm.
classes.
You need to have
There's
interests outside of
yes,
your work,
exactly.
don't you?
Oh,
And if you don't
yeah.
have an interest outside of your work, you can quickly become isolated.
Isolated, inactive, unproductive, and depressed. I
Yeah.
mean, what a
Oh,
picture
nice.
to paint. Okay. So this is what he paints really, that we're missing out as a society on all these people who could be really productive, which would be good for them, would be
Mm.
good for us, and would be good for our children's children. His idea is there is another way, and he is incredibly impressive. And I would like to do better. I don't think I'm going to be running veteran races. I was never very good at running races anyway.
Well, you know me and my track record of running. I don't think I'm going to be running any better in races.
But it does inspire you to think, don't think you can't do things. You really can do anything you set your mind to if you transform yourself with exercise. So,
Yeah.
me and exercise, I've never been
Great pals.
completely sold on the structured exercise, but I have become so, and and with good cause, really.
Mm.
So much of ill health as we age is related to inactivity, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
it's due
feeling
to lack of muscle mass.
yes, so you
Um,
obviously sarcopenia, they call it. It's a great
mhm.
name, isn't it? Always fills me with dread.
Yes,
But
sarcopenia does.
basically from the age of slightly older than you, actually, maybe. Well, certainly in that sort of 55 to 65 bracket, you're really beginning to lose muscle mass.
Mm. Yeah,
And
so you have to kind of be aware that that affects everything. It's not just muscle
no,
mass that we want big muscles. It affects our balance, our coordination, our
yes,
strength,
yes,
the ability to live independently, to get the top of a
yes,
jar.
yes.
All of those things are affected
And who doesn't want to be able to live well?
independently.
I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
who
my biggest
doesn't?
I don't want to ever get to the point where I'm stuck on the floor and I can't get back up again. That would be terrible.
Exactly, exactly. But if we, if we filled a room with, I don't know, over 75-year-olds and got them all on the floor, I
How
reckon
many of them could stand
how
up
many
again?
of them would be able to stand up?
Interesting. Yeah,
Oh,
good idea.
that's really worries me enough to make me do these exercises I do. Of course, I could do better. Interestingly, the other thing that he talks about is that our diets become slightly more important the older we get.
Hmm.
So we've talked about this before. When you're young, you sort of get away with um, using your fabulous metabolism to
You can
sort
abuse
out your
it
diet. Yeah.
you can abuse it to a greater extent. I think that's what I've decided that means now. But I think a lot of people have a realization at some point that, oh, okay, I can't live like this anymore. As I get older, it just isn't going to work out.
Yeah, so the sort of old tea and toast sort of, biscuits, cake, soups sort of
Mm,
regime that we thought pensioners should live on.
mm,
And the problem is it lacks protein. And, we've talked about protein before, and I don't want to overemphasize protein because it's very topical, but it, there is some truth in the fact that you have to be slightly careful about protein as you age.
mm,
And also, if you're isolated and on your own, you're less likely to cook for yourself from scratch, maybe. So protein's certainly something to think about as you get older. You do need protein to keep your strength, your muscles, your balance.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then of course connection. So you're not connected in society if you're not mobile. I
No,
mean,
because it's much harder to get out and about. You have to
yes,
rely on other people to come and get you out and
exactly.
about.
Have you ever
And
been
there's a
to a care home recently?
I have been to many care homes,
So you're well
sadly.
versed, aren't you?
I
And
find it's
yeah,
incredibly depressing, to be honest.
exactly. I mean, I'm sure there's some very lovely care
And
homes.
there are, and I've been
Yeah,
to some incredibly beautiful care homes. There was
yeah,
one, um, which was sort of the Hollywood of homes, I would put it. It was incredible, but still, despite
yeah.
all of that, it is quite a depressing
Um,
insight
so basically, our medical system doesn't work that well for us either because we almost expect older people.
to be ill.
Yeah, and we offer joint replacements rather than, "Look, let's get you active." And I'm not saying
Mhm.
some people don't get
Need a joint replacement, of
transformed
course. Yes.
lives with
Yeah,
joint replacements, but you know what I mean. It's that
I do.
idea that we'll just fix you when you've let yourself get frail. It's just
Yeah.
not good enough. We've got to promote healthy lifestyles in the elderly population for everybody's sake, not only theirs, but we're basically drowning our health service in chronic disease in elderly people.
Yeah.
And not enough research being done either about how you can do this differently. And I think that's one of the problems. So we haven't got the evidence that says it's so cost effective to organize free classes for older people, leisure centers that, give everybody free access, outside gyms. There are all sorts of initiatives. And I know in some groups there are lots of people in that sort of 65 to 75 year
Bracket.
old age group who are doing Nordic walking or walking rambling clubs and all sorts of things, but it's only quite a small proportion of the population that are using them
Mm.
and who think you can be active older. um the WHO gives you all sorts of things, 150 minutes a week, and
Oh,
then
everybody's got the 150-minute week. It doesn't
yeah,
matter how
and
old you are.
interestingly, they increase it to 300 if you retire,
Do
which
they?
yes, which well, apparently, because they take in your inactivity after you stop working. So that's interesting.
Interesting.
So
That's
that's
really
that's what
interesting.
this guy says. This guy, by the way, is a guy called Charles Euxter. His book is Age is Just a Number. It's an old book. Well, I think it was written in 2018, but um, it's worth picking up if you can, if you want to inspire yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yes,
Um,
I've just seen this now. So the WHO said
yeah,
adults aged 65 and above should do at least 150 minutes
yeah,
or at least of it moderate intensity or at least
yeah,
75 minutes of vigorous intensity. And
yeah,
it says for additional health benefits should increase moderate intensity physical activity to 300 minutes per
yes.
week or equivalent. Those with poor mobility should perform physical activity to enhance balance and prevent falls 3 or more days a week. And muscle strengthening activities should be done involving major muscle groups 2 or more days a week. Golly.
So why?
So
So
you
we
can't
we
be bored in
say
retirement. You've got lots to do.
no. So we say 150 minutes, and we all bandy that out in the health service, but nobody tries to inspire the over 65 group, do they?
No.
And the other thing to look at, I suppose, statistically, only 5% of the UK population, by the way, meet the minimum physical activity recommendation. I mean, that is sobering. And then
5%. That's
and then
terrible.
obesity is the other sort of elephant in the room.
Hmm.
Um, so,
But
you
by the
know,
time you've got to retirement, if they're
yeah,
already obese,
yeah.
this is even harder.
Well, then activity gets harder. But if you're looking at the obesity figures, of course, as you know, start a long way before that. So it affects your children and your grandchildren's lives.
Mm,
Overweight children are more likely to become obese adults. That's a fact.
mm.
And they will be less active. So remember, this accelerates in midlife as you begin to lose that muscle. So that
Yeah.
it's a perfect storm, really,
Oh,
of landing up. very frail if you make it to 75,
Yeah.
and you have 30 years ahead at 60.
To say, what should
Um,
I do now?
oh man, I think really you've got to do something. Um,
Yeah. And also
so
it's a matter of, and interestingly, doesn't it, that we just read there, that it's not just about, there's a lot of people who retire and they say, oh, I can go for walks. And it's not about just a little amble around the block. That's not
no,
actually going to do you any good. It's got to be the moderate or vigorous intensity exercise that actually is
you've
going to
got to
be
push
the,
yourself like all
yeah,
these things. Unfortunately, I absolutely hate the muscle burning stuff I do. I
yeah.
mean, I'm even on the rower every morning. I think, oh, here comes
Oh,
the pain.
yeah,
But I'm so grateful to have the chance
to
and
do
the
it.
information available to even, I mean, I could do so much better. I mean, I will do. I'm so fired up today. I'm thinking tomorrow I start adding more weights. And it's that idea that you've got to push yourself
Depends how
into.
fast. No, exactly. And I think this is probably where people get really wound up in all forms of exercise, is
Mm.
that actually you do have to push yourself.
I know lots of people who walk on a treadmill and hardly puff.
Exactly.
And
What's the
they're very
point?
excited with themselves. And I often think, the treadmill of all things, I mean, I know people run on the treadmill and you can do the inclines and things, and it's not, I know for people who have very sedentary work lives, the treadmills are really useful.
Yeah.
But there's so many people who you see in gyms walking on a treadmill,
You
thinking
think,
you could be walking outside by the river doing that, and actually you'd get more sort of goodness out of it. Anyway, I feel privileged, to be fit and well enough to even think that I can improve my situation beyond
mm,
this. I can, and if I don't, it's all on me. I mean, I
mm,
have to take responsibility. The government is not going to give me all those great things I think they should.
mm,
And I do think they should. I do think it would be cost effective to start to really work on encouraging people's lifestyles beyond retirement. And retirement will get older because we actually can't do what we're doing. But we need to be fit and well to enjoy, not retiring.
mm.
And I'm not saying that people with very boring, mundane jobs don't need to retire, but they need to do something else.
Yeah. And I think that's about, putting your talent into the next generation, giving the
Yeah.
benefit of your wisdom and your experience and your
Yeah.
your life,
Yeah.
to other
There's lots of
people.
things people can do in retirement, like voluntary work. And I mean, we discount voluntary work in our culture because it's not paid and therefore it's not valuable. But
Oh,
in fact, it's very valuable to lots of people. And
it
what it
is.
does give people is a structure.
Yeah,
So they get up in the morning and it gives you a form to your life, but also there's the camaraderie and friendship in
of
those
course.
voluntary roles.
Of course. So what we're saying is, we have got to stop writing people off once they
Yes,
reach retirement age. We've got to
exactly.
inspire them to continue to be active
Yes.
throughout their aging
The
life.
third of their life that's ahead
Yeah.
of them.
It's not just stop work and everything else stops with it. Your responsibility
Yeah.
lies with yourself for a better later
Yeah.
life.
And what
And
about your family and everyone who has to care for you too? I mean,
yeah,
you sort of
and
owe
it's not,
that.
yeah, it's not just about people who are in good health. And of course, by the time people get to retirement age, they might well be in poorer
Of
health
course,
for
of course.
many
We're all
different reasons,
unique.
and
Yeah.
there might be genetic reasons and
Yeah,
other
exactly.
kind of problems
Yeah.
that have crept up along the way.
Yeah.
But it's still
You can still do
important.
something at
You can still
any
do something at
point.
any point, at any stage.
They've done some
Yes.
nice little research things at care homes actually, where they've done very short exercise.
Oh, yes,
Uh,
I've seen some of that because they do,
yes,
some of the stuff that they do is hilarious.
yeah,
I saw, those big balls that you do
yes,
for yoga, and
yes,
they give everybody a big ball
yes,
and they sit down and they give them some drumsticks and then they
yes,
do like a workout with the drumsticks on the
yeah, yeah,
ball.
yeah.
And I just thought and it's so much fun.
Yes,
And that's,
exactly. People light up.
yeah,
But they've also, had some fairly good results
of course they
with
have. Of course
people
they have.
improving their
Yeah.
mental and physical health.
Yeah. There's lots to be done. Maybe
There
that's
is
what you
lots
should
to
be
be
doing the
done.
next stage of your life, Mary-Anne, is find a care home and then you can go and
Yes.
inspire.
Do you know I should? Things like dancing, like music, like, just putting some joy in people's lives,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
but you've got to be fit to enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not gonna get out the bath, you're not gonna pick up your grandchildren, you're not gonna walk up a hill. So all your children will go for a walk and you'll be left sitting in a chair. Mm,
That's the worst thing, isn't it? Like left sitting
mm.
at home on your own without anyone to talk
Oh
to.
man, I'm not going there. And I
No.
also don't want to burden my children with my inactive self.
No.
I want
Yeah.
my children to think I'm a pleasure rather than a burden. I mean, I'm not sure I've got to that, but
Mm.
yeah, anyway, there's so much to gain, and the one thing at the top of this list, in my view, is keeping active.
Mm.
All
Mm.
else follows in a way.
Mm.
And we all presented with different challenges. It's not that there are some, things that happen to people in both not only health ways but other ways, losing partners or losing jobs, or there's lots of personal crises that happen to people that will
Mm.
influence all of this. But you can do it.
Mm.
So there you go. That's my Friday excitement.
Excellent. Excellent.
See you next week.
See you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.